Hi, my name is David Wetton and welcome to the Now is the Time for Conscious Leadership podcast. The intent of this podcast is to encourage you as a leader to embrace conscious leadership by giving you access to some of the world's leaders in the field of conscious leadership, both in practice and in thought. My heartfelt wish is that you leave this podcast feeling inspired with ideas to take away and implement in your business or organization to make a real difference in our world. And my guest today is Dr Lynne Sedgmore CBE. Now, where do I start, Lynne, or even end with my introduction? Now, Lynne held 3 chief executive roles within further education in the UK for 17 years, including executive director of the 157 group of FE colleges and chief executive of the Centre for Excellence in Leadership, known as CEL. A book, Spiritual Leadership in Action, has been written by Professor Jody Fry about her time at CEL with the subtitle, Achieving Extraordinary Results Through Ordinary People. Lynne was awarded the CBE by the Queen for her services to education in 2004. She was named one of Debrett's 500 most influential people in the UK in 2015 and was one of the UK's 100 Women of Spirit in 2016. Her organisations have won numerous national and international awards, including the International Spirit at Work Award. It's important to note that all the organisations led by her have achieved outstanding results. Indeed, I believe these results have allowed her and given her licence to be a pioneer in putting ideas regarding conscious leadership into practice. Lynne was a member of the Prime Minister's UK-wide National Review of Public Sector Leadership in 2009 and 10. And was advisor to the 11 national UK leadership academies. Lynne has chaired and sat on numerous national and ministerial public sector committees and advisory groups. I've had the pleasure of reading Lynne's PhD doctorate, Fostering Innovative Organisational Cultures and High Performance Through Explicit Leadership. She truly has lived and embodied the journey of spirituality and embodied it in the workplace for all to see and experience. A truly conscious leader, in my view. In 2015, Lynne retired from her role of CEO of the 157 group of FE colleges. I say retired because Lynne is currently a coach, founder of the Goddess Luminary Wheel Teachings, a poet, interfaith minister, priestess, healer, non-executive thought leader, and Enneagram teacher. Although we are both from the UK, I first met Lynne in Anaheim, California, at the Academy of Management Gathering in the Management, Religion and Spirituality chapter. And she's since become a dear friend, mentor, teacher and fellow interfaith minister. For me, Lynne is one of the world's leading conscious leaders because she's at the cutting edge of theory and practice. And I'm absolutely thrilled, Lynne, to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, David. I think it can only go downhill from there, but I'm up for it. Thank you very much.
So time for you, Lynne, to take 5. Your take on 5 conscious leadership questions.
Right. Yeah.
So my first question is, what does conscious leadership mean to you?
I love that question. I think I know I've spent my life exploring it. In a nutshell, being a conscious leader is knowing who you truly are. You can go right back to Delphi, know thyself. But I actually think it can be used, it's overused these days, but I was using it years ago. I think knowing who you truly are, being authentic to what that is, being congruent. It's not for me or anyone else to tell you what that state should be. It's for you to find out. So I think this has to be a voluntary journey. It has to be something that is from the heart and the soul and something that one wants to undertake because it isn't always easy. So it's knowing who you truly are, being authentic as you can, congruent. That means being conscious of your values, being conscious about what matters to you, conscious about your motivation. When I say conscious, I mean aware that it's brought into your consciousness. You have thought about it, you have felt it in your heart, you know it in your gut as well as your head. So there's an alignment between the head, the heart, and the gut, which is where I think true embodiment happens. through that alignment, knowing your motivation. What are you doing this for? Why are you a leader? Sometimes we know what we have to do as a leader. We get rushed into action. There's lots of pressures on us. But for leaders to really take time to be reflective and to really say, why am I doing this? What's my core motivation? And a question I would add is, who and what am I serving as a leader? I was in further education. It was always the maximum potential development success of the students. Of course, that involved the staff too, but we were a means of making the best happen for our students. We were there to serve our students and their success, whatever that looked like, and it looked differently for different students. For me, conscious leadership also has a spiritual dimension, a transcendent dimension. So it includes perhaps the virtues, my spiritual life, who I am in relation to the divine, and the benefits that I have found in all of that is I know who I am. I'm able to be present. I'm able to be more mindful. I have access to wisdom and clarity that I might not otherwise have. I can get out of my own way when necessary. And so one of my students on my Goddess Luminary course today said, I really get what that means. I got out of my own way. I think it's really important that we are bringing to the situation a clarity, an understanding, an insight that is appropriate to that situation, that maximizes for everyone involved the optimal of that situation, whether it's an organizational system, it's a one-to-one interaction, it's a group situation. So then you make better decisions, you introduce better processes in your organization. So there's a whole range of benefits, and the Spiritual Leadership in Action book by Jody Fry and Joachim and Altman illustrates clearly how a healthy community functions, because it takes everybody in the community. The other thing a conscious leader does is know it isn't them. The I is really we, and a bigger I than ourselves. So we need to know where our ego is. That's been a lifelong work for me, very much so. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that very full and lucid answer. And I totally agree with you that it's not about I, it's the I going to we, as you say, and so many other things in this aspect of awareness and what matters. And and some of the things that you've written, I understand, it's not about the charismatic leader, but it is possibly about holding the space so others can express themselves, and that you also keep on task, because as I said in the introduction, your organization has always delivered excellent results. And quite often I think people think, if I'm going to be a conscious leader, I'm not going to get the results that are required, but you're one person that has demonstrated that.
I've been obsessed with that, because in further education, if you didn't get results, you got the sack, If you failed your inspection and you were the principal, the chief exec, you lost your job possibly. So in that sense, it was important to be really clear. And I did a lot of work with Jody Fry and Joachim and Altman about what is the correlation between having a more conscious or spiritual approach. And it does lead to those benefits. You can't empirically cross-reference, but there is something in the spirit of the place, the soul of the place, where people want to come to work, they want to give their best, they feel motivated, there's a high level of satisfaction. So it's almost like the performance takes care of itself. The other thing that a conscious leader does is develops other people. So in all my organizations, you could have a coach, you had development, there were self-awareness tools, there was basic management development, there was, you were upskilled regularly. So, this doesn't just happen by itself. You are putting in a range of processes and systems and ways of working and support that enable people to work to their optimal and to be supported and to be developed. And a no blame culture. where mistakes can be made and learned from. So there's a whole, I mean, really, I need 3 hours to answer this question. I'm doing my best.
Well, perhaps the next question allows you to express a little more, because John Rennish, who was on the podcast recently, actually in his book, The Great Growing Up, says that there are leaders who actually know or have a sense of what conscious leadership is about, but they struggle to express it because they fall back into the culture of the organization. So the next question is, maybe looking back at the organizations you led, how do you express conscious leadership through your work? Because there's a difference between the theory and then the embodiment in practice.
Yeah. I've studied the Enneagram for a long time, for 25, nearly 30 years. I'm an Enneagram 8. An Enneagram type 8 is brave, is courageous, acts before they think sometimes. So the reason I mention that is I am someone who will go for it and have a go, experiential learner, will try it out. Made lots of mistakes, had lots of successes as well. Have lived on the edge of being sacked many, many times, like seriously on the edge, but was able to rein it in enough. So basically, my thesis that I did in 2013 is all about that journey from 1989 to 2013, about what did that look like. And what it looked like was the self-awareness stuff that we talked about, but it was also about getting clear on right action. It was also being clear about the nature of the processes to put in place, to have good communication, to genuinely be an inclusive leader. Again, I'm back to this congruence, because if you're espousing a set of values and then you're not living them, people really don't like that, yeah? And all the checks and balances on me is that whatever else, and I have got loads of personality flaws, I'm still working on them, I was fair, and what you saw is what you got. Yeah. That's what people would say about me. What you see is what you get with Lynne. She's straight, she's honest, she'll own up to her mistakes, etc., etc. So I'm very lucky to be an 8 in that. And then there are downsides to 8s, like they were scared of me, I was too fast, I was impatient, so a whole range of other things. But I did the work, as I said earlier. Always being inclusive, even though I always knew right. I had to learn that I didn't. I had to learn teamwork and to be inclusive. So it's really, again, knowing who you are. And I think the Enneagram is an ideal self-awareness tool, but use anything that works for you. And then building teams around you. So I've always been, I love having teams around me. I love it if they're cleverer than me. Not all the time, but some of the time. I love it when they've got different skills to me. So having diversity, looking for what the skill set that the whole organization needs, and putting yourself in discomfort with some people on your team, challenging groupthink. So I think it's a range of interpersonal things that really matter, because leadership is relational, and a conscious leader has right relationship, yeah, as best they can. And it's then also looking at the processes in the organization, that communication is always critical. I've never worked in an organization that people feel that the communication is good, whatever you do. And then really having a spirit of inquiry and learning. And as I say, you can make mistakes. And what they used to say in Cell is, you know what, anything can be spoken here. Anything can be spoken. Yeah. I think this is critical, to be able to receive feedback, even when it hurts. And I wasn't that good at receiving feedback early on when I was younger. I've had to learn that. So to be able to receive feedback and constructive dissent, yeah? On my Luminary leadership program, we do whole sessions on constructive dissent. How do we dissent? And I know that leaders, if they're not consciously encouraging and calling forth constructive dissent and difference, the organization is not so healthy if that's not there. So I think that's important.
I'm going to ask you a quick follow-up question on that, because I just feel it's so important. I think one of Patrick Lencioni's things about dysfunctional organizations is the inability to deal with conflict.
Right,
And
yeah.
hearing you just speak, I think part of almost the conflict starts perhaps as a leader in themselves, in that someone can say something, we use this word as a trigger, so they can feel triggered and then they react as opposed to respond. So for those that are listening and watching this podcast, what would you say to a leader who he or she feels triggered? What had your experience, how can they mindfully deal with that so that they stay online and stay connected to their leadership group?
Well, I think that's what for me, that's what the Enneagram has done. It's helped me to see all the things that trigger me. As it happens, as the type 8, I love conflict, you know, and if it's not happening, I used to create it. We are compulsive in terms of challenge and conflict, whereas if you're an Enneagram 9, you'll do anything to avoid it. The issue of triggers is the key to consciousness, in my view. I'm a Ridwan student, I'm a Heart student. So we're looking all the time at our object relation, what is triggering me, staying with it. The key, this is coming towards your last question for me, is being present, being able to stay present with whatever is happening in you and to manage the reactivity. Because if leaders are overly reactive, it creates dysfunction because people close down, everything starts to, they only get told what they think, people think they want to hear. So it's a lifelong work, but all the work that I do with my leaders around being leaderful and present is to constantly be able to be aware of those, what's triggered, to see the reaction and not act on it. Yeah. And the more aware and conscious we are, the less reactive we become. Yeah. And if we are reactive, go away, reflect on it. As an 8, I've had to do that a lot, and then come back and say, hey, I'm so sorry that I was reactive like that. It wasn't my intention. I've now got back in touch with that. This is what was happening for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's that openness.
That's beautiful. And obviously, for me, you are one of the exemplars of embodied conscious leadership. But for you, if you look outside towards others, who for you would be an exemplar of embodied conscious leadership and why?
Yeah, I think that's a fab question. I started looking for other leaders in 1989. I started a different PhD, which I didn't finish, because I wanted to see how did other people do it. I wanted to learn from the best. So one of the people that I absolutely adore is Judy Neal. From USA, who founded Spirit in Work, Edge Walkers. So Judy Neal, if you haven't discovered Judy's Neal work, go and find it now. John Ranesh is on my list. Yeah. I didn't realise you'd interviewed him. And the guild that he's established, the Conscious Leadership Guild, I think is fabulous. Jody Fry, who's an academic, but I've worked with him alongside him in different ways. So Jody Fry, Professor Dr. Jody Fry from Austin. Anne Lim, CBE, who's currently chair of the Scouts. We were principals together in FE, and she's gone on to do amazing work. She's a Quaker. Most of these people have got an active spiritual life, I found. Years ago, Adrienne Fresco, when I went on to a health authority, she was chair, and she now does governance work. A beautiful woman, Adrienne Fresco, CBE in the health service. I want to pay tribute to all my Goddess Luminary Wheel students, because they're all doing their best to be conscious leaders and the soul of leadership students. I want to give a shout out for Ian Williams and Lorna Piercy, who are joint CEOs of Kapla Horizons Charity. They are doing some fantastic work as an organisation. And their own self-awareness. I could name lots of others, but they're the ones. And you, David, too. I mean, I've seen you in different contexts. We've been friends, we've worked together, had all sorts of different interactions, and I know that you're someone who's on this journey as well. So I want to shout out for you too.
Well, thank you for that list, and I think it's just so helpful to those listening. And from my personal perspective, both access as resources and even finding someone perhaps as a mentor, I think is helpful on this journey as well. Someone that can almost help you see these shadow sides, these other sides, help you develop as conscious leader, and that for me is a journey which continues, and I think that's all for all
Absolutely.
conscious leaders, I believe.
I agree with that. I've just been on an 8-day online Ridwan retreat. Obviously, we couldn't meet because of the current situation. So I go on retreats at least 5 times a year, 2 with Ridwan each year and other retreats. So I think you never stop doing the work of consciousness and awareness and finding new material that needs to be cleared and looked at and worked on.
Yes. And my next part of this question is, what resources have you found helpful? But I would really like to hear something about, you have this wonderful expression, which is conscious leader in a leaderful way. If you could share a little bit about what that means, I'm sure it would be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I was chief exec of a leadership centre for 4 years. So I literally got paid for 4 years to explore leadership. So I've explored all kinds of leadership. But where I am now in an experiment, and I love Teal, the Teal framework, the Teal organisation, and the work of Lalou, but based reinventing organisations. But what I've tried to do for myself now is build on the work of Leaderful that has already been explored by various academics. But I wanted to build on that. So I've built what's called the Luminary Leaderful Way, or the Leaderful Way, which is looking at being leaderful from a spiritual and a soulful way. So I've developed that within a Teal consciousness. So it involves flow and spontaneity and service and really being authentic. So it's looking at how leaderful can be a collective thing. And we're all leading at the same time. I think the edge on Leaderful is that we can all be leading at the same time. It isn't a serial thing. And so it's collective and it's collaborative and it's synchronous. There's a synchronous about it. And I'm having a ball doing that. There's a paper that I'm happy for people to access. It's called the Luminary Leaderful Way. And another one done with Kaplan Horizons called the Leaderful Way, which is more from a soul perspective. So what I'm doing is pushing the boundaries. I'm only happy if I'm on the boundaries of pushing into another field. And I'm working with the sacred feminine. How does leadership manifest through sacred feminine? The divine is gender full or gender free for me. But I think at this time in the world, we need to look very much at the rising of the sacred female. Yeah.
And how do you, because obviously I declare an interest, having been on your leadership course and hopefully continue to be on part 2, hopefully at the end of this year. When leaders are looking at this and they're saying, I'm looking to move beyond a patriarch, kind of control above or control over type leadership, but they're then maybe looking to make it to be a matriarch. How do you see it going beyond, because you talk about going beyond patriarch or matriarch, what does that really mean in practice?
Well, this is what I'm using Leaderful for. So it's right. So like we're in the middle of a pandemic at the moment. I think we need at times command and control, really clear, stay home, don't spread the virus, do as you're told. Yeah. Some voluntaryism to that, but really use your common sense. And if you don't, it's a life and death, it's different. So I'm never saying you should never have. It's all styles, it's all styles. So what I'm saying in terms of this, for me, the sacred feminist to matriarch, the sacred feminist is just imaging the divine as female and honouring the female. So leaderful, and the styles vary. It's like you can range around the styles that are inclusive, that are supportive, that are coaching, that are visionary. But it's everybody having a place within the organization. So self-organizing systems have gone away towards this within Teal. You've got wholeness, self-organizing systems, and evolutionary purpose. So these are really exciting. I experimented with all of those when I was a chief exec, particularly wholeness. So for me, an Extinction Rebellion is doing interesting work, whatever you may think about their politics or their action, how they are developing themselves as a leaderful organization. Black Lives Matter. A lot of movements reject leadership, as did the feminist movement, but you get the tyranny of structurelessness if you pretend there's no leadership around. So I'm trying to walk that balance that says we don't want the charismatic heroic leadership, we want something much more collective, but it steps up when necessary. And we don't want this belief that we don't want leaders at all. So I'm working on that edge, and I think teal theories, developmental theories, and my Leaderful way are all attempts to work with that. Emergence is another key theme in it.
I was going to say emergence is one of your themes, and just for those listening, I know that when you speak about teal, you're just speaking about it in the context of spiral dynamics, which many may have heard of, and I think those in that area accept or are experimenting to say we don't have, inverted commas, an answer around this, but it almost suits your style of personality because actually you need to get in there and try it, is my sense for this, with as you said, with a leaderful presence around it. So
I think that, can I just add, and I think also learn from the entrepreneurs. I did a lot of work with the school in Boston, Babson, and Richard Branson was involved at one point with FE. We looked at entrepreneurs because they're not afraid to fail. For every successful entrepreneurial idea and manifestation, there are 25 failures behind it. You know, that's not a given sum. I just made that up, but you get my point. So don't be afraid to experiment and try. And most people are open to that.
Yes. We've spoken a lot, and you've mentioned spirituality. So the next question kind of really anchors into that, because from research from, as we both know, Professor Jody Fry, research from Jody Fry suggests that the inner life is the source of, he says, spiritual leadership. I'm going to say conscious leadership, where inner life is a form of spiritual contemplative practice, including walking in nature, meditation, etc. Now, I know you've just come off a Ridwan School online retreat, but I want to ask you, what spiritual practices have you found helpful for conscious leadership, and why?
Okay, before I answer that, I think I'd like to say to people who don't like the word spiritual, reflective practices, because there's a real crossover between reflective and spiritual has a lot of reflective. So basically, if you don't like spiritual, think reflective. For me, it's spiritual and reflective. Being present, meditation. I've been a meditator since my 20s. I'm devotional, so I love chanting. Give me a Hindu bhajan, I'm really gone. So I love chanting. Ritual and ceremony, I love. And we, again, in the Spiritual Leadership in Action book, we look at how we put rituals in. I don't mean kind of religious rituals, but rituals of appreciation and thanks. And I go on pilgrimages. I have a spiritual director, a spiritual guide, a coach, if you like, to constantly be reflecting and walking in nature. So yeah, I do have a daily spiritual practice. As a Ridwan student, inquiry is really important. Constantly inquiring into what is here now. Who am I now? Who do I take myself to be now? What is really happening here now? And then working in dialectic with others, like what is happening for that person. And we talk about being impeccable. Impeccable is you've done your best in a situation to find the truth that fits and feels real to everyone, including yourself, and you've done as much right action as you can.
Thank you. And I've spoken to some leaders who practice, spiritual reflection practices, and some of them say, well, David, sometimes at the time of my leadership meetings, we just have a period of silence to ground ourselves. Have you found any of these that you've found have really worked in the organizations that you've led, that are inclusive, that people don't feel that you're actually, I'm going to use the word preaching to them, because I think some of the leaders say to me, David, I'm concerned that people might see I'm preaching to them. What's your experience?
I'm absolutely clear. The minute you preach to somebody, you've lost them. You walk your talk, be present, model everything that you hope, be the change, if you like, be the what it is that you want. Yes, I have found people who don't want anything to do spiritual, but would still sit quietly at the beginning of a meeting and got the value of that. So I've used silence at the beginning of meetings for people who resisted it, and then actually 6 months later were saying, oh, we don't do that now. Can we do it? Yeah, who want it?
Yeah.
Self-awareness tools. They don't need to be spiritual, but they're about self-awareness and reflection. I've used all sorts of things in my organisation, from angel cards through to other things. When I left Guildford College, they actually made me a set of Lynne cards, which was hilarious. Really fantastic. So what I've done, and there's a book coming out I've written a chapter for Capilla Horizons on creating a soulful organisation, which has practical things, sharing poetry, if people have got an interest, stories, bringing their hobbies into the workplace. It doesn't have to have a spiritual, an overtly spiritual, sharing books that have inspired you. There's all kinds of ways of accessing soul and energizing the spirit of people in organizations. And they work.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And finally, my final question is it's given unlimited time and resources, what single thing would you recommend aspiring conscious leaders to do?
Really get to know who you are, why you're being a leader, what matters to you, and follow your passion and your heart. If it's dreary or it's awful or it feels heavy, try not to do it. Find what really, really makes your soul, your spirit sing as a leader.
Which of course will be different for each leader, I'm guessing, and this is the beauty of it, isn't it? That what may resonate with one won't resonate with another. So
I don't believe in silver bullets or formulas. I believe in really traveling a journey to know who you are and what you want. And often your soul can sing in the same place that it didn't used to sing. If you actually start to explore things and see the world, you can even reframe the current situation you're in. So a lot of people are frightened. Oh, if I do this, I can't carry on. It's probably you can. Maybe you don't, but that could be a choice. So you can reframe where you are if it's feeling a bit dull and the whole journey, that inner journey, can be a delight in and of itself.
Thank you. And now I do have what I call my Columbo, just one more thing question. It always used to ask just one more thing at the end. So my one more thing actually is for you, Lynne, to just, the opportunity for you to share some of your own resources, some of your own offerings, which you feel will be helpful to those watching and listening.
Okay, I mean, for people who are academically minded, there's my thesis, which is actually very personal. It's not it's a professional doctorate. It's more an autobiography. So there's a journey there, I think, with some models and some experiences. Spiritual Leadership in Action is useful to read. David, I've given a copy of the Luminary Leaderful Way and the Leaderful Way. There's 2 documents there. Enneagram. Please, if you haven't got a self-awareness tool and you're looking for one, experiment with the Enneagram. I'm working with about 50 people at the moment in teams and organizations and individuals exploring that. And every time even people who go, no, they get sucked in. And I know, David, you love it too.
I do, yes.
I'd be happy if you gave my email if anybody felt inspired by this. I don't have a website because I can't be bothered, and I've got more than enough work. So I don't have one. So if people wanted, if you give my email out, my Lynne Sedgmore, lynne.sedgmore@gmail.com, I'm happy for people to email me if there was something. So really, and come on my Luminary course, you've got the link to that. We're all having a ball on that, I can tell you. Yeah, I think that's it really, from my point of view. There's lots been written about me, so Google me on the internet. I'm in chapters in books all over the place and stuff like that. I've got a bibliography somewhere. It's huge because I've been studied at length by academics and in different in FE and in the spirituality, spirit in work. So yeah, Google me, email me, see what I've put on there. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Lynne, I just want to really just thank you from the heart so much one, for being on the show, but more so for the way you're showing up in the world of conscious leadership in the way that you do. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I love it. Thank you, David, for doing this. I think it's fantastic that you're doing this, and I hope it will open doors and portals and enthusiasm for lots of people.
That is certainly my wish and my heartfelt desire. So thank you.
Blessed be. Yeah.
And I want to thank all the listeners to this podcast. And if you're willing, please do share a link to this podcast with those you think would truly benefit from it. I do truly believe that now is the time for conscious leadership. And with all the inspiring, heartfelt work you do as listeners, I have no doubt that conscious leadership will become a thriving reality, making a difference for the greater good of all. So until next time, I'll leave you with a blessing from John O'Donoghue. May the light of your soul bless the work you do with the secret love and warmth of your heart. And so it is.
So it is.